Hello, folks. It's Craig Bushon. Welcome back to the show. I'm very excited about this segment. It's something that I am bringing to you because I think it's very, very important. We're going to cover a couple, I think, strong issues that I think the person sitting to my right, and those of you on Ustream always know, go to craigbushon.com. You can see what we're doing in its entirety. We archive this program, so if you're catching this thing right now and you can't stay with us, always know, go to craigbushon.com, and we'll have it archived there for your enjoyment. Well, sitting to my right is Mr. Alberto Gonzales, the former U.S. attorney to President Bush, correct?
That is
and
correct.
To the American people.
That's correct.
we have to remember that.
I was appointed by President Bush, but yes.
For the American
on behalf
people.
of the American people.
Well, thank you so much for coming in again.
It's good to be back.
How are things with you? Well?
Doing well. I'm in Austin. I'm in Nashville, but glad to be back in Austin.
In Nashville. So what's up in Nashville?
Well, I'm a professor. I teach constitutional law at Belmont University, and I also am of counsel with the law firm of Warlow Lansden. So my family and I moved up there right after Christmas, and we really have enjoyed it.
Okay, for all the people in Austin, what's better, Austin or Nashville?
You know, they're very, very similar. When
there's the judicial answer.
Think about it. I mean, they're both capital towns, they're both music towns, and they're both college towns. They're both hilly. It's really remarkable, the similarity between the two communities.
I've been there. It's absolutely beautiful.
It really
is. So, but I wanted to have you on the show because there's a couple main issues that are really affecting people when they watch TV. I don't care if they're watching Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, whatever. The Supreme Court, Obamacare. I don't even remember the name of the whole thing. It's now just Obamacare. I'm sure it has a technical name.
The Affordable Health Care Act.
Thank you so much. I just know it by Obamacare. And a lot of people, they're concerned about, they think that this could be it. If the Supreme Court says that this is completely okay, they think that they've lost the republic.
Well, I think they would be incorrect. If in fact, this act is so unpopular, we still have a political process. If you get enough votes in the Congress, if you win back the White House, you can repeal it. So it's not the end of the republic, per se. Again, we have the political process to fall back on in the event that the court says that what the Congress and this president has done is constitutional. They're not going to be saying it's good policy. Their responsibility is simply to decide whether or not, under the Constitution, does the President and the Congress have the authority to do this. And
they're taking it serious. I mean, taking 5 hours or 6 hours to look at this, I mean, that's a long time. They normally don't allow that amount of time.
It is extraordinary. We haven't seen it in 40 or 50 years to have this much time allocated for arguments in a particular case. And I think, for me, I think it reflects an appreciation by the justices, by the Chief Justice Roberts, that this is a case of national importance. The American people are very interested in this case, and this is a way to show the American people that the court is really doing its work. It's being careful and deliberate in considering all these arguments, and at the end of the day, we'll get the best result possible.
Well, one of the big arguments out there is that if it goes through, if it doesn't change the way it's being proposed right now, that the government can mandate anything. They could tell you to buy anything.
Well, of course, that is the argument made by the challengers of 26 states, including, of course, Texas State Attorney General Greg Abbott. But, not necessarily so. I mean, I think you can make the argument. As I listen to the arguments, you listen to Justice Kennedy, I think even he acknowledges, while he expressed grave reservations about being able to force people to do things, I think he expressed an acknowledgement that the market for health care is unique. It is very different, and maybe it is so different that this doesn't set a precedent. So I think we need to watch very carefully what happens here, particularly with respect to Justice Kennedy. And one thing your listeners need to understand and appreciate, just because it's unprecedented doesn't mean it's unconstitutional. And that's what the court's going to decide.
Well, it's so interesting, and you're right. You mentioned Attorney General Greg Abbott. I've had a couple conversations with him, and he is extremely confident that it is going to not just be, an eraser mark here and there. It's going to go away completely.
Well, obviously, I think that'll be one of the things that the justices are going to have to struggle with if they decide that the individual mandate is unconstitutional. The question then becomes, well, can it be severed from the rest of the act? I think some people would say, well, if you in fact sever the individual mandate, that really does gut the legislation, and that therefore the court should declare all of it unconstitutional. I have a concern about doing that because it seems to me that again, if the court says, okay, our job is to decide which part of this is unconstitutional, the individual mandate is unconstitutional, that's all we're going to touch. Then if the legislation doesn't work for that because of that, we still have the political process. Congress can then go in and they can correct the legislation. I'd rather have
it takes 2/3 of them, though.
But I'd rather have Congress do it. I'd rather have
anything.
Congress do it than have the court trying to make up a new kind of policy. And so it seems to me that probably the most conservative approach is to simply strike out the individual mandate and leave in place the rest of it and let Congress come in and tinker with it and try to fix it.
Well, what's interesting, I heard a lot of people tell me, well, people who are for it, they'll go, hey, you have to have auto insurance. And I'm like, well, yes, but you don't have to have a car, and you don't have to have a driver's license. You don't have you're not born and all of a sudden you're endowed. You have to have that. This is something that as soon as you're born, you have to have it. And that's a paradigm shift for the government to say, as soon as you're born, you have to do this. I don't know anything else that they can do that with.
But the counter argument to that is that at some point in everyone's life, everyone's going to need some kind of health care. And why should people freeload over those who pay insurance, those who decide I'm not going to get health insurance? Well, at some point or another, they're going to need health care. I think one thing that your listeners need to appreciate is that we have serious issues in our country with respect to affordable health care. And whatever happens in this litigation, those problems are going to continue to exist. Some people believe or of the mind that the Affordable Health Care Act, even if it stands, doesn't really fully solve our health care problems. But if it falls, we are still left with this problem. And, we're going to have to look to Congress and the president, whether it be Obama or the presumptive Republican nominee, Governor Romney, and we have to look to them to say, okay, we still have this problem. How are we going to fix it?
I think that, and you hit a nail on the head for a lot of the conservatives out there who don't like this when they see what Mitt Romney did when he was governor. And I think people are confused about the difference between those two, where you have the 10th Amendment and you have the states' rights to do what they want to do. I mean, all 50 states are basically laboratories to figure out what works for them. And so I think that's where some of the fear is, that if we don't get it taken care of now, they don't believe that Romney is going to do much with it, even though he says he has, or he will do something about it.
I think just because Governor Romney supported it as governor of Massachusetts, which is a very liberal state,
okay, absolutely it is,
doesn't mean that he's forfeited the right to say nationwide we shouldn't have this. I don't buy that at all. I think that's campaign rhetoric, quite frankly. He is on record, clearly on record, in saying that, hey, the first thing I'm going to do is repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. So, I think if he wins the presidency and if Republicans pick up the added additional seats in the Congress, then what happens in the court becomes of less importance.
Well, you made a strong point earlier that if it is held up, or the majority of it is held up, that it's fine, that it meets the constitutional standard. And a lot of people who don't want it to be there, it'll force them to get even more engaged, to go to the polls and vote. We have a huge issue in this country that a lot of people still don't vote, period.
No question about it. And I think that it very well may inure to the benefit of the Republican Party and to Governor Romney, quite frankly, because at that point, people who do not like the Affordable Health Care Act will see that the court is not going to help them, and that really the only remedy is the political process, and that in order for that to be helpful, they need to pick up additional seats in Congress, and they need to take control of the White House.
Well, I tell the folks, I have, in this program, I reach across all lines. I have far leftists, you would call them, or very liberal people who listen to the show, because I believe in renewable energy. I just believe we have to do it smart. I don't believe we need to do the Solyndra ways. It is a private sector thing. I think we should invest in it. There's real technology out there. So I speak to a lot of them out there. So when I speak about these issues, some of them are going, well, come on, wait a minute. We all need our health care. We need to, it's too expensive anyway. And there's a lot of argument there to be had. And I get that. But ultimately, I don't care what party you go to. What I like about this process is that people are having to pay attention on all sides. And this is listen, this is what this country is about. It's not supposed to be easy and clean. It's supposed to be get down and get your hands dirty. The political process is hard, and people are supposed to have to pay attention. And listen, this free republic just doesn't stay free because you just get to sit idly by and let it just it doesn't run on idle. You have to get involved.
Democracy is messy, but
yes, it is.
But it's still the best system we have in the world.
I completely agree. All right, so we'll change a little direction here because it kind of flows right into the courts. We have the Supreme Court, which is supreme, and they are the highest court in the land. And I've been focusing in on, and this is another reason that I reached out to Greg Abbott, and he's committed to come on the show to start educating people about judges. Another thing I like about what's going on is that people are now seeing what judges do in our society. And they're seeing it right there on the front page. They're seeing it on every station. They have different opinions about what it means. But a judge is extremely powerful in our society.
But we spend a lot of money electing our representatives, electing the governor, electing the president, because we believe in certain policies that they support. But what many people neglect to appreciate is that those policies can be undone by a judge who hears the case when those policies are challenged. And so it is regrettable that too many people in our society, not just in Texas but all around the United States, simply are uninformed or misinformed about judges, who they are and what they do. And I think that's dangerous. I really would urge your listeners to really pay attention to judicial races, because if they care about their government, they care about the policies advocated and supported by the elected governor, the elected legislature, the elected president, the elected Congress, then you need to care about who the judges are, because those judges have a role to play as to whether or not those policies eventually become law and stay law.
Well, they set precedents. I mean, they are the ones who say, well, I agree or I disagree, or this is how they interpretation means a lot. You run that. I mean, you've been in law for quite some time. You sit in front of someone who's on the bench, right? And you're there and you're pleading your case. It's really their interpretation of how they read the law, right? I mean,
but if you're talking about lower court judges, district court judges, for example, intermediate court judges, they're supposed to be bound by precedent, by Supreme Court precedent. But if you're talking about the U.S. Supreme Court, they're not bound by precedent. They can ignore precedent. They can chart a new course.
They can do what they feel like.
Exactly. And the truth of the matter is, presidents, one of the things they look at a number of things in making a decision about Supreme Court nominee, but the most important thing they look at is ideology, which is, how does this person approach a decision? Not so much the outcome of the decision. What is the process they use in reaching the decision? That is what's very, very important. Whether or not are they going to be influenced by their personal biases? Are they going to look at nothing but the plain words of the Constitution or the plain words of the statute? That, to me, is the most important thing that a governor or a president should be weighing and making a decision as to whether or not some man or woman should serve on the bench.
Well, what's interesting, you talked about some of the lower courts, and it brings to mind, I'm heavily involved with our military through an organization called Heroes Night Out, and we have a lot of soldiers coming back that are suffering from TBI, traumatic brain injury, or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and we're really pushing hard to get judges who understand the plight of a soldier, what they saw. They come back, there's some issues that they have to deal with, and we have to make sure that not just in one town or one city, maybe Austin, that across the board we have courts that understand the plight of this modern day soldier. The last 10 years we've been fighting a different kind of war, and when they come back, they don't have they don't just have physical issues, there's some mental issues. And, what is your view on that? I mean, how the courts understand the plight of soldiers who come back?
Well, but, everyone has a role to play in the judicial process. And so if, in fact, that someone's experience, a soldier's experience, has contributed to some kind of conduct that is now being challenged as unlawful, I mean, it's incumbent upon the counsel to present that evidence in the court, and incumbent upon the counsel to educate the jury, to educate the judge. So I think everyone has a role to play, but I don't know whether or not judges should be basing their decisions based upon pity or anything like that. I mean, their job is to interpret the law, is to provide justice under the law. And that's what we expect judges to do.
Yeah, I think it's the education that I'm talking about, where judges need to be educated on. We're better off sending a person who just came out of war, say in the last 8 years. I'm just giving a scenario, and got home. Obviously, there's still some issues there that they have to deal with, and maybe they got pulled over for drinking and driving or something. And then instead of throwing the book at them, say, listen, we need to get you into, we understand there's some issues there. You're trying to medicate yourself. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
Well, but I think there you're talking about a much larger problem. Because I think when you look at the number of people who go to prison, sometimes for relatively minor offenses, it calls into question whether or not we've got our priorities right. I mean, for example, I don't think we can win the war on drugs through incarceration. It requires education, rehabilitation. So I think we need to be looking at other ways to deal with people who have problems in our society other than putting them in prison
Absolutely agree with
or putting
that.
them in jail, including
Absolutely.
our veterans.
Yes, because we just see a growing number of people that, listen, it's so interesting, just to stay on that subject for a moment, Vietnam would be the last real big conflict that we're involved with. They have a lot of veterans coming home that saw battle for some period of time. We have a lot of soldiers coming back who are living through things that the soldiers in Vietnam could not. So we're having to deal with the mental side because of what we can do in triage out in the field. Our medics can keep people alive a lot better. We've never had to deal with this type of the mental side of battle. People surviving things that, years ago you didn't survive. You didn't have to deal with it.
Right. I think it's a challenge not just for the judiciary, but it's a challenge for society
Absolutely.
As a whole.
Absolutely. And one other thing, because it's top of mind out there, this fast and furious stuff that's going on down there, and everybody thinks that what's some clarity? Have you focused on that at all? Can you bring some clarity to that situation and how it's happened, how we are where we're at?
I'm not sure what you mean by that question. How it happens,
I think how people. Let me put it another way. What is your viewpoint when you look at something like the Fast and Furious?
Obviously, it's tragic whenever an agent is killed, and in some degree, the government may have played a role, whether intentionally or not, in the death of that agent. One thing that your listeners have to understand is that it is not uncommon within the United States, for example, to have a practice where you let contraband move. And the reason you do that, assuming you can follow it, but you do that because hopefully it will lead you to other people within a conspiracy. Hopefully it will lead you to a kingpin, a drug kingpin, for example. So you let the contraband move, but again, that only works if you can follow it.
Right, exactly.
And I think what happened here, of course, is that the government couldn't follow the guns. And as a result, we had a tragic outcome. But in terms of what else, what the Attorney General knew, what others knew in the department, that'll be something that Congress will have to sort out itself. But obviously, this was a tragic event. The intention may have been fine, but obviously the execution was flawed.
And again, folks, you're listening to former U.S. Attorney General to President Bush and to you, citizens of the United States of America, Alberto Gonzales. And again, I thank you so much for coming in today. And what is on your horizon? I mean, someone who sits in your position, and then you get back into the private sector, tell folks give an update on yourself. What's the future? I mean, obviously, you're someone who communicates well. We need smart people out there. We need more conservative Hispanics involved. We need more people involved.
I'm not sure who you mean by we, but
American citizens, America. We need more people involved in getting educated about the issues.
Well, I like talking about the issues, and I do write a lot, I do speak a lot, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us citizens who have a certain level of experience to speak about these kinds of issues and try to provide clarity on some of these more difficult issues. And I continue to try to do that, want to do that. I think it's important. I think, as a Hispanic, I think that's important for me to do. And I like doing it and will continue doing it. I enjoy practicing law at Walter Lansing. I really enjoy teaching, to giving these students a sort of a unique perspective of what it's really like at the highest levels of power. But I also I like traveling around the country and talking about these kinds of issues. Immigration is important. I worry about the Republican Party and its relationship with the Hispanic community, precisely because of the way that we talk about immigration, which I think has been a disaster. But we're making progress, and we'll see what happens in November.
What is the fix there? In your opinion, with the way the Republic, and I agree with you, by the way, the way the GOP, that grand old party, how they deal with really minorities, period, really, but specific to Hispanics, what are some of the things that they need to do that they're not doing?
Well, okay, but when you say minorities, selfishly, I think Hispanics, represent a more attractive target for the Republican Party simply because you look at the growing numbers.
That's true. You're right.
That is probably the best and only way the party's going to grow its base, is to be able to attract Hispanic votes. And so for that reason alone, it's very, very important. I think for someone like Governor Romney, relationships are very important. Family, friendship, relationships are important in the Hispanic community. Governor Romney somehow needs to make a personal connection, and it's got to be him. It can't be Hispanic surrogates. It can't just be his policies that are good for Hispanics and getting jobs. He has somehow got to make a connection like George W. Bush did, that even though this is a person of privilege, he understands Hispanics. He's going to work with Hispanics and help them with their issues. So that's what Governor Romney needs to do in part. The party itself, it needs to quit talking about immigration like they're anti-Hispanic, because it sounds more like they're anti-Hispanic than it is about being anti-illegal immigrant. Listen, I believe in the rule of law. I believe in a secure border. But we have to be able to talk about this issue in a way that's civil and compassionate. Otherwise, we're going to lose in 2012 and beyond. We need to support Hispanic candidates. I mean, really support them. When I ran for the Supreme Court in 2000, Governor Bush was out there stumping for me. I mean, my whole campaign ad was his voice talking about his support for me. That's what the party needs to do, is to really embrace Hispanics and say, you know what, we care about you not just every 4 years when it's a presidential election. We care about you all the time because we realize you represent the future of this country. You represent the future of this party.
Absolutely, and I think minority is probably the wrong word to use, especially in states like Texas, Arizona, a lot of border states. We have a lot of great Hispanic people who live here, some of them undocumented / illegals, depending on who you talk to, right? But the reality is, I agree with you. I think we need to give people their dignity. I think we don't need to attack people. We need to educate people. We need to help grow. We have to grow bridges, if you will, not burn them down.
Right. I don't want your listeners to believe that I believe in complete amnesty. Listen, I'm a former chief law enforcement officer of this country. I think if you're in this country, you need to be here lawfully. So let's find a way to put people into lawful status, or they need to get out of this country, quite frankly. But I think, the way we talk about this is very important.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
I greatly appreciate it. Folks, Alberto R. Gonzales, he is a person that you need to pay attention to. You see him on big national stuff out there. He's getting the message to you. Pay attention. Focus on the judges. We got Greg Abbott coming up in the near future. We're going to talk about some things. But the bottom line is, get to know your neighbor. Get to know each other. We're all in this together, ladies and gentlemen. This is Craig Bushon, and we'll be back.
Okay.
There we have it.